All right, looks like we're live, pal. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Grit and Bear It podcast. My name is Richard Blosser, the host of the first and only Hershey Bears podcast out here in the podcast network, and we are brought to you by the Old City Sports Network, of course, on a new home and new possibilities. And joining me here tonight, as it is all hockey's eve for not only Hershey Bears fans, but some Capitals fans as well, I am joined by my partner in crime. If we were defensemen, he'd be on my left wing. I'm pretty sure that's how it would go. This joined by Corey Schwartz. Corey, welcome, brother, and happy hockey eve to you, my friend.
Hey, Richard, how are you? Happy to be here. Happy hockey's back. Couldn't tell you how happy I was to see the pictures of the ice this morning that we saw on Twitter for Giant Center. So can't wait to get there tomorrow. It's going to be great to be back a couple days earlier than usual.
We're going to get to that. Funny you should bring that up. Let's hold on a second here. We'll get to that here in a brief moment. Don't you dare jump ahead of me. But as always, Hershey Bears fans, thank you so much to joining in. We do have sponsors here as well. Make sure you check them out. Iron and Steel Threads, uh, River Lily River Lily Hockey Company, SeatGeek, Beard, Warlord, Beer Oil, and Polished Commercial Cleaning. Bunch of other things you're going to see down on the ticker below. But hey, that's sports media these days. But of course, coming at you from a bit of an updated studio here, from all you watching on the video. Yes, that is a Hershey Bears blanket that's up there. The Francois Bouchard jersey that has seen count them, two Calder Cups in that jersey has seen. So a little bit of my hot dogging and grandstanding out of the way. So Corey, what's your you said a little bit there in the intro, but you excited to get underway once again now that we've gotten through the first week of training camp. Rookie camps are done. Couple of preseason games under our belts. It seems like we're getting the juices flowing. The gin's getting worked up once again.
Yeah, we're basically there. It feels like we're really experiencing the thick of it at this point where like you said, preseason's done. We're happy for that, or not preseason, rookie camps. Kind of the early formalities are out of the way. Stuff that we actually get to watch. First preseason game for the Caps was back on Sunday, and was a pretty good showing for what we're to expect here. And rare treat, hockey in September at Giant Center. It's kind of a rare exercise now. Maybe it'll get to be more frequent with the new CBA and all that kind of good stuff. But we're kind of back in full, and then a little less than a week we'll be back at Giant Center for the lone home preseason game of the schedule for the Bears and camp starting. And hey, we're just happy to be here at this point. It's one of those things. No matter how many times we do it, I know you've been a hockey fan for a long time. I've been a hockey fan for a long time. I just kind of get like it's like a kid on Christmas. I think is what I thought to put on Twitter. Anytime you see that the ice is back in, first time going back in the building, you know, anytime you get to do that, each time you get to do that, we haven't always had it, we take it for granted sometimes, but it's just awesome to be back and, real excited for what this Bears team's going to bring. Obviously we get a little bit of NHL preseason action, which is going to be pretty cool. I'm excited. I'm a little bit of a traitor, I know, but I'm a Flyers fan. So, Richard, I don't know if I told you this, but I've told a couple people this was my first experience with an NHL preseason game in any form. Seeing the Flyers was actually supposed to be way back in the lockout year of 2004-5. There was supposed to be a preseason game between the Flyers and the Avalanche, who were Hershey's affiliate at that time, but it got canceled due to the lockout. So I never got to experience that. So, 21 years later, I'm getting the full experience of seeing the Flyers in Hershey as I wanted to when I was a kid. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That like preseason preseason hockey, I've always described as like, it's like spring training baseball. It's like preseason NFL. We're so starved for it. We're so ready for it. And when it's here, we rejoice and we have fun. And yes, give me all this. And then you watch the games and you're like, oh, right. This is hockey, but it's it feels like a dress rehearsal sometimes. And that's exactly, what and not to sound too heartless about it, it is a dress rehearsal, but it is very important, and fans should enjoy this because in the new CBA, the preseason games are going to go down from 6 to 4, with the addition of 2 more regular season games being added. um, and there'll be some new things put in this year. Dress codes have been loosened up with teams. Corey, what do you think of, like, the preseason's going to get reduced, and unfortunately, maybe some of these American Hockey League teams that host these preseason games may lose out on them.
It is an interesting caveat to things here that you're going to see that change. I think it's just fine. I'm sometimes like you said, when we get to preseason, and hockey's back, and you go, yes, hockey's back. We're so excited. Obviously your joy is through the roof. But by the time you get to like the fifth or the sixth preseason game, obviously some teams use it as an evaluation period for their prospects, which is really good. And the pros maybe don't need it quite as much. And one game is probably sufficient for most of these guys to feel quote unquote ready type of thing. But I think it's going to be. I think the two games, especially the fact that they're, you're kind of getting some of those local matchups back. Like I know with like the Flyers, they said it might be like the Devils or the Penguins. They play a little bit more, things of that nature. I think that's a win-win, honestly, to see more of those matchups, which are rare in this day and age for whatever reason, just because of how many teams are on the NHL. A lot of good things are coming with that CBA. More money to be made for some of the players and like the AHL, as well as that new caveat to the rules for kids that are 19 that may actually be ready for the pros type of thing. There's a lot of good stuff there. So I think although AHL teams might lose out on being able to host a game like this, it'll probably be a long time before Hershey is able to maybe host a game like this. But that just makes it more special in my opinion. So I'm very stoked for it. I think that this is going to be cool, and you could still fit these things in there. 4 games, I don't think anyone's going to be complaining about less exhibition hockey, honestly.
Nah, I don't think so either. I think, like, as long as it'll be mostly divisional games. Maybe some teams might still, Philadelphia and Lehigh might still hold on to their agreement, or just continue to do more rookie games, or maybe rookie games are the next route that these places will go. But anyway, let's jump into Capitals training camp. Has been getting underway. Few games under the belt for the boys down there in red, white, and blue. So they played on they played on Sunday up there in Boston, and some Bears did get some points. Hendricks Lapierre, I think, had 2 points. Miro had a couple of points. Great to see Sonny Milano back on the ice once again. He's healthy and ready to go. And it seemed like a lot of Bears that we expected, that needed to make an impact. The players I just mentioned, Miro and Loppy, who needed to make an impact, pretty much did so. And that's going to be a real interesting battle for that 12th and 13th forward spot there in DC. So, Corey, what were your thoughts about the game there in Boston?
I thought it was an excellent showing. I thought, as both a Capitals fan, who you're watching to see who's going to make, like you said, the 12th and 13th spots for the team. You gotta love what you saw from Sonny Milano. Weren't sure how he was going to be back, from his injury. There's tough injuries to come back from. It was he's dealing with. So really good to see him back in full force and scoring goals and looking like himself. Like he said, I think afterward it was a good confidence booster. And Hendrix Lapierre is kind of penciled in as the 13th guy, and pencil is the term that I would use for it, just because of it's up for anybody's grabs at this point. But there's not a lot of spots just in general. So it was good to see Milano score. It was good to see, Lapierre looked like his MVP self from 2024. So really happy to see that. Miro and his line with Henrik Grabinski and Bogdan Trineyev we've seen before. They looked excellent as well. I thought the standout for me in the second half of the game when the Caps kind of, their foot kind of came off the gas pedal a little bit was certainly the story was Garen Bjorklund taking over in between the pipes there. He was very excellent. Stopped all five shooters in the shootout. Had to make a lot of saves in that second half, just for being in about half the game, I think it was. So, really excellent showing from him because, like, just as much as some of these spots are up for grabs there, you have to wonder the same thing for Hershey. Hunter Shepard's not here anymore. So that still doesn't feel right to say. But, it's going to be Clay Stevenson and who, basically. Like Mitch Gibson's pretty good. He's got a chance. Antoine Keller is, probably needs the experience of being in the ECHL for a little bit, but he's a guy that has some potential to him as well. So, and Seth Isley as well was pretty good. So, it's certainly a battle there, and that's everything you'd like to see. And Brian Chesley scoring a goal too. I mean, love seeing that from him. Very happy, to see a lot of these kids chipping in and getting those early dividends paying off. It is, as Bears fans, that should alleviate a lot of your concerns. The better this preseason is for lots of these kids here. So very excited about that. I thought it was about as perfect of a game as you could ask for.
And yeah, it's pretty much what we expect. As these are chances for these younger players. Maybe the junior kids get out there and play a period or two, and that's what you want to want to see and expect out there. Good to see Bjorklund out there and get his time out there. And I think you're right. It did. I think a lot of Bears fans were wondering what is this youth movement in Hershey's going to look like. And don't worry, Bears fans, we're going to get into that. But I think some fans were very much like, okay, what is this new Bumpa crop going to look like? Because there is a ton of change coming to Hershey this year. And there are a lot of Bears fans who don't like change. And I think it was good that they got to see that, okay, I think we're going to be in good hands here. I think, yeah, Chasely, that kid's pretty good. And it was good to see also somewhat some familiar faces out there as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's one of those things. We saw Ryan Chesley a little bit last year. Memorably scoring his first goal in his first game. It was a big goal too to get Hershey on the board and eventual win. And you could see he's got a lot of poise, a lot of the makings of a number one defenseman who could go up to Washington and make a real impact. Very much not unlike a guy like John Carlson type of thing. I think that comparison is pretty good. It's lofty, but it's good. So you see some of those other kids like Eric Smatejko, I think played on Sunday. You got to see some of the flashes of guys who won't be here this year, but in the future. Um, some of those guys, it wasn't a ton of prospects. There's still a good amount of guys there. Definitely Caps players there. But if I'm a Bears fan, and like you said, I think there's a lot of people that are kind of writing off this Bears team for this season just because so many guys left. There's no possible way they could be good ever again with so many guys. But the Caps and the Bears, they do their research and they have they watch these guys all the time and they've watched they know what they're building type of thing. And when you look at it, I think when you really start to see the pieces on paper, like your day one lineups and stuff like that, you're really going to see that although there's certainly reasons to think that the Bears will take their lumps. It's not going to be a season that matches up with, let's say it's not going to be quite like 23-24. What season is going to be like that? But they're going to take their lumps. But these are kids with a lot of potential, and I think that's the most exciting thing to me is that there's a lot of potential for this to be a very fun season as a result of just the sheer volume of fresh blood in the lineup.
And yeah, there definitely will be. And I don't usually do this, but thank you so much to one of the predecessors to this, Frank Schofield, the man behind the mic for the Old Barn Hockey Show for many years. A man who, when I originally wanted to do this, I asked, remember reaching out to Brock Kirshner, and I'm like, I don't want to step on your guy's toe when I do this. And he's like, no, go ahead. We like to see more doing this. So to see Frank chime in, thank you, Frank. Thank you, brother. So
Frank's the
sorry, that
man.
was a bit of a sidetrack for me. I was just like, oh my gosh, Frank Schofield's actually watching this. So, all right, so let's get into some of the first rounds of cuts. Some teams already made them this past Monday. To quote the great Homer Simpson, I think it was in season 7 of The Simpsons. All right, all of you played so great, which is why it really made it hard for me to cut you. So going to the Bears, this was from Caps PR on Twitter. Grant Cruikshank, Justin Nockbar, Dalton Smith, Luke Topo, Toporinsky, Nick Lieberman, Josh McDonald, and goaltender Seth Ilsley were all sent to Hershey. Maxine Shafir was sent back to juniors, and Miroslav Shatan, yes, Miroslav Shatan's boy, former Buffalo Sabre, former Pittsburgh Penguin, his boy is here and was sent back to juniors. Corey, we see this list, and I'd say that sounds about right. Guys that had Hershey contracts got sent down to Hershey, and the junior kids got to skate around. Here's your jersey, and go back to juniors.
Yeah, it's pretty standard fare for training camp, I'd say. It's all AHL contracts, allows them to get to Hershey, get set up, be the first guys to be there. I would expect more cuts to happen Friday or Saturday preceding when the Bears are, supposed to reveal their initial camp roster. I think they said it gets started on Sunday officially, but I would imagine the on ice portion won't be until Monday. But we'll see about that until when that gets revealed. We don't know that yet. Standard fare. You let the kids that are not on Washington contracts. I think the junior ranks are starting to get underway. Their teams are starting to play games. So, it's good to get them back with their teams, get acquainted, get games under their belt, just get the ball rolling with for some of those guys while they evaluate a lot of these other kids. Some of them it'll be later cuts certainly, but it's standard fare stuff so far, and the earliest of the cuts. So, um, you know, we're just starting to get things in place. The Caps are now down to 2 groups, I think, of players in practice from 3. So that's always the first step to reducing camp rosters. So good stuff all the way around.
Yeah, this is not like in years past. I think the past couple years where that list of assigned to Hershey was probably a good bit longer than what it has been. And not a lot of familiar names on there. Of course, Scarposa, Vec, Massey, others that have gone on to the KHL. I should know certain people have been posting highlights nonstop of the KHL. I'm not going to mention any people in the room. So I kid because I care. I kid because I care, Bears fans, because it just shows like how attached, in a good way, some fans are to follow these fans all the way over there. So nothing wrong with that. I kid because I care. So yeah, you're right. The Bears announced that that more will be on the way on Saturday. You're right, probably Friday, Saturday. More cuts will happen. Training camp is set to start on Sunday. And if that doesn't sound like an orientation day to me, I don't know what is. If that doesn't sound like coaches meeting, sign your forms, what's your skate size, what jersey number do you want? To me, I don't know what is. And then full training camps will be officially most likely start on Monday. Because I know fans will probably ask over the weekend, will training camps be open? Will we be able to see these? Most likely, yes. Most likely. I can't speak for the Hershey Bears. This podcast is not affiliated with them in whatsoever. But this is just the first round of cuts, and more players we are going to see as we get closer to the preseason game. Now, speaking of, we know that we got closer to the NHL season as the Bears were able to put out their ice this year. And I just need to get something like out of my system, Corey. I'm gonna bring this up here on the screen, and I'm sure you've probably showed it on your Twitter feed. Um, just get this down here. See if I did this right. See if I did this right. Let's see here. Seat of your pants broadcasting at its finest, folks. All right, so let me just bring this up. Bring this up here. You see that, Corey? The ice.
Yeah, I see it.
That now two things with that logo. First off, and we're going to do some inside baseball here, folks. That logo is actually facing the opposite way it usually does, because usually the logo's the other way, facing the tunnels. Now, I found out on X that it's facing that way because that's where the NHL cameras are going to be for the preseason. So instead of being in their usual spot all the way on the other side, the logo is facing the club section. But what gets me is the logo is not inside the circle. I'm sorry if I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, Bears fans, but the sticks are sticking out of the circle. It drives me nuts. Like the bottom part is sticking out here. Like like you couldn't bring it in a little bit more. Now I know that happened with when we beat Coachella Valley the first time. That was a bigger logo, but the Bears going with the alternate Washington Capitals inspired Stars and Stripes logo to give definitely more of a Capitals feel to it. But an interesting choice that they went with that logo at center ice.
Oh, as soon as I saw that logo, I knew that was what was going to go down at center ice. But I think they're just being faithful to it, if anything else, because I obviously haven't seen this one as a center ice logo, but I'm pretty sure that's how the Capitals center ice logo used to kind of protrude out of the actual circle itself for, back in the day, so to speak, when they used to use that logo all the time. So I think it's probably just more of a being faithful element to it. But it is kind of interesting. Like you said, I think I saw the same post you're referring to about this logo that once this preseason game is done tomorrow, they're going to actually take the ice apart and they're going to flip that logo back to the way it should look to be facing the other way for when the regular season starts, which is kind of an interesting caveat of this whole thing. Actually, the same thing happened with the rookie series that the Flyers and the Rangers had at PPL Center a couple weeks ago, where they were broadcasting on the opposite side of what they would typically do for AHL TV. So, kind of an interesting caveat that's kind of happening again here as well. But we won't. I don't guess we don't know the technical side of things and what all goes into making this broadcast happen.
And there is a lot, Bears fans, don't get me wrong. And to anyone else who's watching this, we have 25 of you watching. Thank you so much. That, yeah, you can probably hear me say, aren't you making a big deal out of this? But that's a little bit of my ADHD and maybe a hint of OCD thrown in as well. But I get that, Corey. Like, yeah, I think it's also a sense of familiarity too. Like, if you look at that logo as a Caps fan, you're probably going to put together a little bit that it's inspired by the Capitals a bit. And I understand that the Bears weren't going to put a Capitals logo there, even though I thought, well, maybe they could do the split logo like they did in the past. The Hershey Bears on the left side of the circle, and then the Capitals on the right. I think they did that in 07 and 08 or in 08, 09 possibly. But other than that, it's just great to see the ice down at Giant Center. And I didn't show this as well, but the Bears are getting into the center ice line having little details in it. Apparently, there's a Bears paw print that's on each and every one of those red and white areas on the play on near that head across center ice. And a lot of different teams do this. I think like the Canadians put the Canadian logo in there, or some that like put a maple leaf in there for some reason or whatever. But it's those little aesthetics you like to hear, and teams love to promote on social media so much. But as we head into tomorrow night's game, we're going to shift to talk about tomorrow night's game there at Giant Center, 7 o'clock start, as as the Flyers and Capitals are going to be taking each other on at Giant Center. Spencer Carberry, through Hershey Bears Twitter, said he actually had a little bit of butterflies being there. He had a lot of good memories in Hershey. Um, he'll be he'll be glad to be back in the building on Thursday, and being able to stand on the bench and coach the Washington Capitals will be a great moment for him. And I think that's a great connection that the Bears and Capitals have been missing for a while. And Coach Nelson was pretty good at doing this too, not to throw shade on the former bench boss. But Carberry knows where he came from. He knows he's known the Bears, and yeah, he coached the team through the blurst of times. But I think it's good to see Carberry really looking forward to coming here to Hershey, even if it is just for a preseason exhibition game.
Yeah, it's good to gonna be good to have him. Honestly, there's a lot of guys. Carb's kind of. I feel bad for him in the sense that he didn't really ever get a fair shake to win a Calder Cup. Obviously, was part of the rebuilding year in 2018-19, and then just straight up just never got a chance to contend for the Calder Cup. The last 2 years before he was plucked out. Actually, it's easy to forget that he left the organization to go to Toronto before coming back. So, kind of a twist that you forget about at times. But, such a good coach, even better dude, absolutely fantastic choice to have up in Washington as their head coach. Lots of the staff on, Washington, it's easy to forget, they have Scott Allen and, so many others. Emily Natsky is the other one that comes to mind here, and among many others, of course. It's just as much with the players as it's going to be with the staff that so many of them were in Hershey and, made their strides at Giant Center before, moving on to the show. And it's kind of cool. It's going to be cool to have so many of those familiar faces back. Like Carlson is another one where, he hasn't played here since the day he lifted the Calder Cup in 2010. It'll be nice to have him back. Even some of the more recent guys too. It'll be a real, who's who of, former Bears legends who are going to be, in the lineup there. We might not get Ovi, but, we as Bears fans, we can celebrate our history, so to speak, with the Capitals through this roster, I think.
Definitely. And yes, Alex Ovechkin did leave practice a couple days ago, day to day with a lower body injury, but he was back out on the ice, everyone. Don't worry. All is well with the grade 8. All is well. It does not appear that he will be traveling with the team down to Hershey, which does suck a little bit because then we could say to Wilkes-Barre, "Ha! Crosby skated with you guys, so Ovechkin skated with us, so ha." But there's going to be a lot of really good players that'll be coming down for this game. I'll bring it up here in a little bit. But I think it's great that I think that this game is happening and this connection is happening. And I know there were a lot of fans that really scoffed at this when this was first announced about a month ago. And I think this was something that's been really overdue to do something like this. And it sucks it comes at the end of this of the CBA where we're going to be losing preseason games. But I really like that we're that us Bears fans are going to have opportunities to see this game, have some Bears players that are definitely going to play tomorrow night. And I think it's a nice little taste of what's to come, more than just one AHL preseason game.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it is nice because, like you said, it's been a long time, 19 years since the Capitals last played a preseason game here in Hershey, and certainly for all, obviously there's a lot of hubbub in it. Like you said, a lot of people are kind of like, there's mixed reactions to it at points, but I think it's a good thing. And it's kind of cool that it's between the Caps and the Flyers. Two of the most recent affiliates and longest tenured affiliates too of the Bears. You think the Flyers have been involved in a couple different ways with Hershey. They sent some of their greatest alumni in some senses to play in that outdoor classic alumni game back in 2018, and it seems like the relationship there, although they're not affiliates, of course, is seems to be good, in good shape between two former affiliates there. So it was nice, the Caps press release on the preview of the game mentioned that, the fact that the Bears and the Flyers, had such a long and, affiliation. And, lots of people, I'm not old enough for it, of course, but, lots of people still ride or die by Flyers and Bears, just didn't leave that back when they switched to the Avalanche in some ways. So, that's an important piece here in, South Central Pennsylvania too. So, obviously we all love and respect the Capitals. We obviously have our own, places where our favorites lie in some ways, and we're a little more convoluted, but it's going to be good, and it's going to be good to see both those teams. And it's an important tune-up game for a lot of these guys are probably going to be dressing a lot of prospects. Hoping we see some good players on the Flyers side. I'm selfishly hoping to see Matvei Michkov play, so I'm fingers are crossed on that one. But I'll be happy to just see some of the big guys play in this game. It'll be fun. So like I said, early exercise and getting back to preseason hockey, seeing the jerseys on the ice, it's going to be a really cool experience, I think.
It definitely is. I've been trying to look up. I think they definitely already announced the group that was coming out. They've said that both Protas brothers are going to be out there. Both Alexei and Ilya are going to be out there. That'll be great to see. I hope we have on the back of their jerseys we have an A Protas and an I Protas out there, and then both Strom brothers out there, Dylan and Matt, will be out there on Thursday playing together, which I'm sure is going to be a huge moment for them, and good for both of them to have a chance to be able to play together. So I think there really is some good anticipation that's going to come out of this as a way that unofficially kickstarts the hockey season off here in Hershey a bit of a week early. But we're not complaining. We're definitely not going to complain.
Yeah, and you're definitely spot on about the Protas brothers. They're both, the thing about the two of them is they're both massive human beings, and they, very much, have a family resemblance. So a little bit of distinction is going to be very important for this one, for sure. And how great is it for Matt Strome too to get to play with his brother? Matt's on an AHL contract, so they're obviously going to bump him up to a tryout agreement of some kind in order to officially get him into action on in this game on Thursday. It's great for him. It's great for those guys that might otherwise not get this opportunity. Ilya and Alexei could totally definitely team up in the NHL at some point someday. They're both pretty young and so talented that I could see that happening somewhere down the line. So it's great to have those connections. And I think Spencer Carberry said that he's a sucker for those kinds of storylines. So that's going to be a really great aspect of it for Bears fans to see a lot of past, present, and future Bears in this lineup too. So it's kind of really a celebration of John Carlson's, obviously the guy who won it in 2010. You have a myriad of players from the 2023 and 2024 teams that'll be there, and a couple of our guys that we're going to get to know, as well as guys that were will be here this year who have been here. So I really think that if you're a Bears fan, this is really a who's who of players that you're going to want to get to see play in this capacity here. It's going to be a special time.
Oh, definitely, definitely. It'll be fun times in Hershey tomorrow, and definitely in Hershey tomorrow night. And Matt Strom, friend of the podcast as well. I think I remember I interviewed him down there in the press room for a while. Just a really great guy. Honestly, all the Bears guys that come through who I've spoken to, but Matt really seemed good. And actually, he always texting his brother Dylan up there in DC. And he says he does throw little chirps his way sometimes. So it's good to see that brotherly relationship. And we'll have more to come tomorrow night. So let's just do some quick hits around the division here a little bit. I'm going to throw out, we're going to rip through all the teams that the best that we can. I'm going to give you a question about each team, and then just try and give me your quick thoughts on some of them, the best that you can, Corey. Sorry to kind of put you on the spot here in a little bit, but as we say, seat of your pants broadcasting at its finest. So you ready, buddy?
Absolutely.
All right. So we're going to start in Bridgeport, Connecticut with the Bridgeport Islanders, who returned a decent amount of their players this year, but really it's the new face in management with Lou Lamoriello out on Long Island, and it's already been said that management is actually going to start focusing more on Bridgeport, because I remember Zach saying for the past year or two on the radio that Bridgeport just cared about player development. They did not care about winning, and it showed. But now it seems like Bridgeport might actually be putting some stock into these players.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt the former Hershey Bear Matthew Darsh kind of running the show there now, which is my favorite thing to point out with that, as well as they have some new coaching staff there. I believe it's Rocky Thompson, if I'm not mistaken. He of the former Philadelphia Flyers bench boss. I should say on the staff there, of course, but it'd be interesting to see if they could turn the ship around there in Bridgeport and put together a more competitive team. Is we all know where Bridgeport finished. They were the first team that was officially not going to make the cut in the playoffs. They were tough. Everyone obviously respects that they had a lot of good players. You know, but I think it's going to take some time. The Islanders are kind of maybe going to get some more prospects there. Hopefully they can do a little bit more to shape up theirs. I mean, more competitive Bridgeport is a more competitive Atlantic Division. I think that's good for everybody, right? Is that it's going to be a challenge night in and night out, and you know we'll have to wait and see on that one because I'm curious to see how fast that this could take shape for them.
I think any step in the right direction for Bridgeport is going to be a step up from where they've been the past year or two. But Bridgeport has always found a way to turn the competitive switch on against us. So we'll see how it goes for the boys there in Western Connecticut. So up next, we'll go to Charlotte, to your current reigning and defending Eastern Conference champions in the Charlotte Checkers, who unveiled new uniforms, more Florida-inspired jerseys. They're not bad, but this was a team that lost a good amount of players that were part of their run last year. Kokkonen left, Zardoff with the Capitals now, Zach Delpy, retiring this past offseason. So the question would be for Charlotte is, could they do it again?
This is one I haven't done a lot of studying on at this point, so I don't know exactly what they're shaping up to be. But as you just alluded to, they lost a lot of players. The cost of winning, going even just as far as Eastern Conference champions type of thing. It's hard. You're going to have your roster pilfered. I think Abbotsford is going to experience the same type of thing with a lot of players, moving on and moving up and moving on in many ways. You know, Charlotte's always tough though. That's one of the things about them is that no matter what, they're stubborn, if anything else. They will refuse to go down. The gentleman that plays on the organ there at the arena will keep them pumping for a little while there. So I'll be interested to see exactly how well they do. I believe the one thing I do know about them is they're going to have former Bear Brian Pino on their roster this year, if memory holds true there. So if he's there, I think that's certainly one tough customer they have there. So I wouldn't be surprised if they still field a pretty good team. I think the theme around the league this year is that there's a lot of change just for almost every team this season. So it will be interesting to see where the chips fall just across the division. Who kind of has it and who kind of doesn't at this point. So I would expect Charlotte to still maintain their identity of being very tough to play against.
Agreed. And Mr. Bojangles Coliseum is always a tough place to play. They are tough at home, and they know it, and they are not afraid to tell you it. So up next, we will go to Hartford, Connecticut. No longer the XL Center there in Hartford. Truly an end of an era of Hartford hockey up there. But I wonder with the Hartford Wolfpack this year, the Rangers are doing a lot of gutting of their prospects, and there's more talk of them being in the Kaprizov sweepstakes at the end of the year, if not the trade deadline. Crazier things have happened. And it seems like Schneider's going to get a chance up there with the Rangers. Is Hartford really going to be gutted this year. Like Hartford's always hung around the playoffs. Last year they didn't make it, but the past couple of years they did. Do you think the prospect pool's running out?
I would be concerned about that personally. Now, again, I know I'm flying on the seat of my pants here a little bit, but if that's where the Rangers' trajectory is heading, I wouldn't be surprised if it's maybe a step back for Hartford a little bit this year. And that's kind of a tough pill to swallow, considering, like you just said, they didn't make playoffs last year. It was kind of an up and down season. It feels like the Rangers are a little bit more active in, you know, pilfering their roster, as you said. I like that term where they're using certain things, um, as bargaining chips, maybe to sort of be in a good position for some of these things. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's maybe not quite as good of a season for Hartford, but if that Rangers prospect series really taught me anything, is that the Rangers always seem to have some guys hanging around who can step up and fill the void there. And like you said, Hartford's always a tough team. They're certainly have pieces to be competitive, definitely. So at the end of the day, I wouldn't be surprised if it is a little bit of a step back for this year, but I wouldn't write them off completely as a guarantee. Obviously, so many teams make the playoffs. At the AHL specifically with how the Atlantic Division is structured. So I could see them certainly making it in as one of the bottom 5 or 6 teams, of course. But I think it's going to be a hard season for them where they're really going to have to battle to earn that. Is where I would kind of put them in my rankings there if I had to make it.
Yeah. Now I thought he left, but Dylan Garant is still around. Thank you to Elite Prospects for this. He's still sticking around with them. I thought he left during the off season, but if I'm him, get out of Hartford, dude. I do not think there's any room with the Rangers for him. They have Igor. Jonathan Quick is defying time, still sticking around there. That's your goalie 1-2, and I don't know if Louis Domingue is still there
I don't believe
or
he is.
not. Okay, so there's it. He is. I, Actually, he isn't. It's actually going to be Tylen Boyko. I know we saw him in the playoff series, and him and Durant are going to be your 1-2 punch there in Hartford. And yeah, it's going to be pretty rough there in Hartford. But hey, my number and Trey Fix-Wolansky will be there, so I think they'll be okay.
I
Next,
will make them tougher.
it definitely will. So up next, let's see here, Hershey. We've already talked. Well, actually, we'll stick with us for a second. With the Bears having practically at least half the roster turnover, could this be a down year for the Bears, which for us could be battling for a lower playoff spot? Now, I know 6 out of the 8 teams get in, but we have a ton of question marks coming in this year. So how much of the youth is going to be an impact for us?
I'm very optimistic about this Bears team. I yap about it all the time on my page with it, where the way that this team is structured to me is one where it's, yes, the youth players coming in will have to play a pivotal role, but I think people are mistakenly conflating the fact that there is going to be youth with the fact that and with the departures, meaning that it's going to be all the youth. It's just a bunch of kids thrown in there. That's far from the case. If one of these kids isn't ready to step in on the blue line, for instance, you have Nicky Lieberman and John McDonald. They're 2 guys who, have been here and know what the assignment is, so to speak. They can step up. Same with the forward position. There's room for these kids to flourish, which a lot of people have been asking for that. When are the kids going to get a chance to take over in Hershey? And this is really it. But the thing that I love about it, same with the defensive core, is that these are high quality Washington prospects. Ryan Chesley is a high quality prospect. You have David Gucciardi, who is very much demonstrated that he's a strong player. Guys they picked high in drafts. Cam Allen and Leon Mugli, and obviously up front you have guys. The Bears will hopefully benefit from having Andrew Cristall and Ilya Protis, and the list kind of goes on from there in many ways. You know, Patrick Thomas was very confident in talking about his game during training camp and all that kind of stuff. So, it's a lot of guys where, like, yes, they're unproven and, we don't have a guarantee, and so many guys have left, but this team still has the potential to be really fun, I think, to watch. And, you got some good guys in free agency that are vets and can lead the way. Sheldon Rempel and Graham Clark, as well as, Louis Belpedio and uh, Callie Rosen. Love what I've seen about all those guys so far with their scoring and leadership capabilities. So I do think that, although yes, we're turning the keys over proverbially to some new faces, I I I have a lot of faith that they can, will it be number one or number two? Maybe, maybe not. But I wouldn't say that, three or four is, I think, a realistic expectation to have. And, I think they could finish one or two easily in some ways. Just if as long as everything clicks, I don't see that as unreasonable.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and I'm not too, I'm not also, if I maybe I'm using the wrong term. I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater in all this. Like, I think a youth movement in Hershey is good. There's just going to be more of an adjustment with a new head coach in Derek King, a new system, new players. The only, like, I feel like consistent thing that's returning is Captain Aaron S. And and he'll keep the kids together. Daddy will keep the kids in line. And it's going to be a lot of new, and just don't expect like big things out of the gate like we've had the past couple of years. Could take a little bit more time for things to gel and come together. So
Very fair.
up next we head down 78 to the PPL Center in the Lehigh Valley Phantoms farm club of your boys, the Philadelphia Flyers. And dare I say the Phantoms could be a bit of a sleeper team this year. Nobody's talking about them. And when nobody talks about a Flyers team, that's when they're the most dangerous. So I'm looking at Lehigh and I'm like, I think this could be a year that they could, proverbially take the next step. They have a new head coach coming in as well. And I think this could be where Lehigh could be battling in the top half of the division this year.
Yeah, that was one of the things that, you kind of expected to see at some point with the Flyers rebuild in many ways is that, they're going to draft and build from within. And obviously, not all those guys are going to be, going right to the Flyers. They're going to need to, hone their game in Lehigh Valley. And some of that's starting to come to fruition. I mean, you got, some top end Flyers talent. Denver Barkey is going to be a pro. Alex Bump is going to be a pro. It's kind of a similar situation to Hershey, I feel, in a lot of ways, where they've, let go of some of their, older players that they had there. Louis Belpedio is a foe turned friend from Phantom to Bear. Um, I think that his loss is going to be, a understated one for the Phantoms. Belpedio has a history of, being able to propel his teams that may be mediocre into greater heights. It's one of the things I noted with his history. Um, I do love, their, like I said, their up and coming core is great. And, they're, but just like with Hershey, it's almost a mirror image in some ways where, they're going through a new head coach. They're going through those changes. You know, Obviously they have, they're a bit of an underdog team in that respect. But, I would expect them to be pretty tough. And, like you said, dare you say a sleeper team to be a hit this year. So, and as the Flyers rebuild continues, and they're kind of inching along towards saying like, hey, we're going to become a playoff team and a contender. I think that Lehigh Valley is going to be a consistently dangerous team, just like what the Bears kind of faced off with last season, where they, and the season before that, really, where they were tested and pushed and pulled. And in 24, I think that matchup was severely underrated as a real test for the Bears off out of the gate both times. So, like you said, don't sleep on Lehigh Valley. It's going to be a tough regular series matchup with them.
That series, actually, both of those series have been brutal, hard fought. Phantoms, Phantoms Bears hockey of fighting for every inch and getting goals where you can. So I think the 12 games we're going to play against Lehigh this year are going to be tough, no matter what place it's at. So I'm not passing up on the Phantoms by any means. So let's head a little bit further east as we go all the way out to Rhode Island to Providence with the Providence Bruins, and I wonder with them, with the big boy club there in Boston, is Providence going to do their usual holiday run and climb back into this and feast off of maybe bad teams there along the I-95, or is this the year where Providence is just, dare I say, mediocre with Brandon Bussey heading elsewhere? And who knows what Providence is going to have left in the system, because it's going to be the Michael DiPietro and maybe Luke Cavallin show there between the pipes.
Yeah, like you kind of alluded to, I feel like it's kind of been, Boston's trending towards a team that needs to rebuild. They lost some pieces, and they were talking about, obviously you got to see a little bit of it during that preseason game last Sunday, where you're kind of looking at, two futures where I would say it seems like they're heading in opposite directions. Washington's is kind of coming to fruition all of a sudden, and a lot of key players that score goals are pieces of that. But with the Bruins, I almost wonder if this, like you said, is the time where maybe they take a step back, and but Providence consistently does a lot with a little bit sometimes, where, like you said, they're very tough, won't back down kind of team, but it seems like they were kind of trending the wrong direction last year, and it doesn't seem like that's getting much better. And like you said, some of the guys like Brandon Bussey in goals is gone this year. I think that's a huge blow for them in many ways. So I I'm a little bit concerned about them just in that sense, but like the, they're always such a team that I feel like they just consistently do so much with so little. And I'm just looking at their projected roster, and sometimes they may be a team where it's not a guarantee you go in there with a win. I mean, they still have some good guys like Patrick Brown and Fabian Lysell, and
Yep,
Georgi
yep.
Merkulov is obviously there. Even former Bears, in the system guy Eric Middendorf is going to be on that team too, so that's always kind of
Ah,
fun.
mittens.
So otherwise, I don't see a whole lot that I'm a little bit worried about once you go past some of those guys. But like I said, they consistently do a lot with a little. So I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they're still a stubborn team to play against. If anything, I think they will play with a lot of pride up there, and maybe they'll be surprised, and surprise a lot of people. But it is hard to, I don't see strides of marked improvement, and they could certainly prove me wrong there too.
They seem to do it every freaking Christmas. Every year it happens. So up next, we stay in the I-95 corridor and we go to Springfield with the new look Thunderblades, who completely embraced their blue mantra. Got new primary jerseys. This is what we're calling them now. But I like them. I think the whites are a little plain, but I like them. Um, this is another team that I think that I think should be concerned of this year. I think Springfield's got a lot of returning with Matthew Pekka, Chris Wagner, Hugh McGee, Matthew Pekka, former Bear, Kale Kessie, and a lot of other, Sam Bitten still hanging around there. And there is a lot of returning returning players, and I think St. Louis has more on the way that are coming in. So, and Colton Ellis played really good last year at Springfield, and a team that I think just was kind of the odd team out in the playoff rush last year. So, I think this is a year where Springfield takes a big step forward.
I agree with that. They have those. I'm a big fan of those jerseys as well. I mean, I think that once they introduced that kind of color scheme, it was a natural thing to keep it there too, certainly. But I agree with you. I mean, I think that Springfield's kind of been an interesting team. I feel like they've kind of, middled around a little bit since they made it all the way to the finals back in 2022. But some of the pieces are coming to fruition. I agree with you that I like their goaltending tandem with Ellis and Sharenko. They're,
Mm-hmm.
prospect guys. I mean, Sharenko's like 6'4" or something like that, where
Big lad,
he is a
big
monster
boy.
in net in many ways. Very much, think that that's going to be a good thing for them. Nikita Alexandrov's there. I think their roster is pretty set, and like you said, there's a lot of familiar faces. Don't know as much about. I assume that they have some kids coming in. I'm just kind of looking at average ages of some of their guys there. It seems like they're trending a little bit on the younger side, of course. So good to see for them. I think. Um, if they get the familiar face, it reminds you of the Bears in some ways. They have a lot of familiar faces, and they may be infusing some youth into the equation there. I think that's always a good mix. Anytime I feel like I said, they've stagnated a little bit, but you can only hope that it starts to pay some dividends, and they move up in the ladder competitively at this point. So I like what I see from him, or Springfield, and I think that they might take a step forward and be that fourth or fifth playoff spot perhaps this year.
Definitely, definitely. I mean that corridor up there, Springfield, Providence, Hartford, Bridgeport. When you have such a tight knit group like that, you're going to have a bunch of teams just beating up on each other, and that's always led to tight playoff races every year. Once we get past St. Patrick's Day. So, lastly, we head to Wilkes, and this, I'm not saying this as a card carrying Yinzer. You can't really see it, but it is back there. So, I know Rucker McGroarty is injured, but I'd be really concerned about this Wilkes-Barre team. If they can stay healthy, I think they could be a really good team this year. With Sergei Mirashov being full-time there, if Silvos stays down there all year. Now, Blumquist has a day-to-day injury, so that's going to mess some things up. But even if it's just Larson and Mirashov, I think that's enough to carry them. A lot of their forwards are coming back, and a lot of youth with more on the way. And their defense, and Jack St. Ivany is still there on defense as well. Great bump of crop with Emmy Pintany Emmy as well, and Scooter Brinkley with them. Gosh, I think this could be a really good team this year.
I was a little bit concerned that they, seem to shed a lot of talent during the summer, but I think that also means that they, have hopefully some guys coming up who are going to replace them. I agree that, Rucker McGroarty's injury is going to be a big blow to them, um, which concerns me a little bit because, like, I see, and just I'm looking up and down, their projected roster, which is usually pretty pretty accurate to see. I see some names that I recognize, and I see some others that I don't really. So I would be cautiously optimistic about this team. Now, obviously, the Penguins the last couple of years have proven to be a little fraudulent. I hate to say, like, they'll have a pretty good regular season, and then last 2 years they've gotten, I guess, first rounded, perhaps is the way to say, by the Lehigh
Yeah,
Valley Phantoms
yeah.
2 times, which that's kind of tough too because it's such a short series. So
Mm-hmm.
unfortunate end of the season, but you know I never put it past. I don't think I could ever picture a reality where the Penguins aren't tough and annoying to play against, and you hate every time the Bears have to go up there because it's never easy. The Bears could win a bunch of games up there, but it would never be simple. It would never be easy. So, I think that they have a lot of good pieces. I did not realize that Raphael Harvey Pinard is there. Um, you know, some really good pieces there. And like you said, Murashov was very impressive to me during the times we saw him in Hershey last year. He always seemed to be the guy where it's like, oh, we're not going to score too many on this guy kind of thing. So um, they have some good pieces there. I'll give them to them. I think they're going to be pretty tough.
Yeah, there. Yeah, thanks for letting me know that as well. Yeah, Pinard's there among on the forward group. Tristan Braz and Alteni Calvert as well. These were names that were with them last year. Avery Hayes as well. Yona Kopanen always seemed to have big games against us. Valtteri Puustinen, you can always mark him down for a point against the Bears. Every single fracking time with him. So,
And Richard, the one thing I would like to add, sorry, I just thought of this after
yeah.
on this one as well, is the only question I'd have for Wilkes-Barre is how much will Pittsburgh inevitably pilfer their roster at some point? Is that always seems to kind of happen where they lose that key player or two, and that ends up being a major detriment towards them. So that's my other kind of storyline to see if they can maybe avoid this time around.
Well, hopefully, Dubas and Wilkes-Barre are hopefully have seen what seen what a few other teams have done and stocked them up to the point where even if it does happen, they're going to be okay. I think there is going to be a little bit of spring, a little bit of a spring cleaning after the trade deadline. And if I'm a Wilkes-Barre fan, I'm holding your breath at the trade deadline to see if anything does happen, because Pittsburgh will be very active. They'll be selling, but they'll be very active there, and that will have effects on Wilkes-Barre. So yeah, it could very easily be this team's up near the top and they're coasting, and then a whole bunch of guys are going to get time up in the NHL at the last game of the season, and then they'll fall off. And yeah, and yeah, you're talking about their playoffs. That happens every year because those 3 game sets, you can't assess too much from that. A bad bounce and a fluky goal, and your series is done, basically. In fact, that's been Wilkes-Barre's pretty much MO. They have a bad game one, and then terrible things happen to them in PPL. So it's tough to make. It's tough to. It's tough to really gather things in a 3 game series. Even friend of the show, Patrick Williams, had said that. So, but we will deal with that after tax time. So this was a big meaty episode, but that's what happens on the night before hockey. So about an hour long into this, Corey, thank you so much for your time, man. We always seem to do this, but it's always fun. So before we head out of here, tell everybody where they can catch you.
By the way, Richard, the one thing I want to add before I do that is major shout out to the Bears ice crew for all their hard work behind the scenes on that. We said it earlier, and it just crossed my mind. They had to take that ice apart and redo it to flip that center ice logo around after this preseason game. It was over ahead of next, like it's with less than a week and with concerts and stuff going on. I can't imagine. I mean, we saw that post on Twitter that the Bears posted where they were working on it at like 10:30 at night or something like that. Like these guys are the real MVPs. But yeah, I'm over on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at HBH Nation blog over there, Bears Hockey Nation. Lots of coverage, lots of stuff going on here. I'm planning the mega season preview article with everything going on there. It's a bit of an undertaking there, but excited for tomorrow. My personal Twitter is at CSWA11 if you want to follow my random yapping over there over other things. But yeah, really excited to get the season going. This was a fun one to do, and I was excited for it before, and I'm more excited for it now that we've done this show here. I'm already kind of bouncing up and down. I'm ready for tomorrow.
Well, I know a lot of Bears fans will, and thank you so much for coming on, man. And yeah, you're right. The ice and the ring crew do so much. And for any of you Bears fans that are there for post game jersey auctions when they got to do teardowns, they are right on it. Like within 20 minutes of the final buzzer going off and the 3 stars being handed out, they are on getting that stuff done. And I mean, we used to have friends of the family who worked on stuff like that, and I could tell you stories how they pulled overnighters to turn that ice to stage ready for a show that's coming in the next day. So, it's tough job, but somebody's got to do it. So that'll do it for the Grit and Bear It podcast this week, everyone. Thank you so much to Corey Schwartz for coming on. Thank you to the Old City Sports Network. As we live stream the show this week, audio version of this will be out Thursday. Will be out late Thursday morning or Thursday afternoon. It will be out on my socials. I'll tag Corey in this. As usual, you can catch me at rbloss64 on Twitter, which is where I rant and like stuff about sports and comment on stuff that's funny to me. The show Grit and Barrett P1 will be out there. You can catch episodes of the Grit and Barrett podcast. The audio form of it will be there as well. And this live stream's gone very well. I look forward to do more of this throughout the year. But Corey, thank you so much. Thank you to Old City Sports and all the sponsors you've seen here during the show. Thank you to Jesse Bell and the gang over there. And we will see you tomorrow night, Bears fans, at Giant Center, or if not, next Wednesday for the preseason opener. But that is another show. But above all else, and for the first time I can say this, go Bears. We'll catch you next time.